Good morning, my friends. Hello, hello, hello. So, the topic that we're going to talk about today is one that I've just recently heard a term for, and I know it's been happening for years and years and years. Now, we're all kind of looking at and thinking about, we've heard about over time quiet quitting. So, over the last, since the pandemic, there's been this term quiet quitting, which is people pulling back and not really quitting, but not giving their all, not giving everything they have, which is a problem. This is a problem, but we're not talking about quiet quitting today. I didn't realize how much this was a thing. And then I read about it in the Milwaukee Business Journal, and it does sadden me. And as I said earlier, I've heard of this before, and it aggravates me. In fact, before I read this article, a friend of mine told me about a situation, which I will tell you about in just a moment. So let's explain what this is. This is what is quiet cutting. Quiet cutting is the term that I read about. And quiet cutting is where leadership or HR or some combination of the two will reassign someone out of their current role, potentially into a less desirable role for that from that person's perspective, possibly to a less demanding role in terms of what's what's required of them, different skills required. Maybe it's a lower paying role, and in some cases, they may even lower the person's pay. I've seen that happen. And in these situations, this to me, this is a passive aggressive approach to handling performance issues. And it creates damage both to the employee that you are reassigning and to the people on the team who are seeing this happen. Here's why. You are, one, not living by your values, because I can't believe that honesty and integrity are not somewhere in the values of your organization. And quiet cutting is being dishonest. It's not being in integrity. It's not being truthful with the employee who is having the issues or who is not performing. Now, you may have someone who is not in the right role. Maybe they're working on skills, and those skills are not aligned to their gifts and talents, their preferences, what they're actually gifted and talented to be able to do, what comes more energetically, naturally to them. Then help them find the right role, either in your organization or in another organization. So you may have someone who definitely just isn't isn't in the right role. However, if you have someone who really maybe used to perform and aren't anymore, or they're new and they're not performing in the way you need them to, which is a situation that I'm going to share in a moment, doing quiet cutting and moving them to a different role without having honest and candid and supportive conversations with this person is just outright wrong. I'm sorry. This is just being dishonest. It is not being forthright. It's not being a leader. And you are being avoidant. You are being passive aggressive. You are not living up to the value of what a leader should be in terms of being supportive and truthful and in integrity, and making sure that your team is performing at the highest that they can. You want to think about why you're if you're going to reassign someone, why you are, and you want to be as truthful in these situations. Let me give you an example of a situation that I heard about from a friend. The company hired, they have multiple locations, and the company hired a new supervisor for one of the locations. and the supervisor was not performing up to what they expected. And I may have mentioned this situation in a previous podcast or a previous live, and they started taking away responsibility from this supervisor without saying why and without being clear about how they weren't performing up to expectations. That's just wrong. If you have to first make sure that all of the expectations for a role are clearly communicated to that individual. That's number 1. You need to make sure that you are giving them feedback as they are performing or not performing up to those expectations. That's good leadership. Not giving feedback, not providing honest, candid feedback is the sign of an ineffective leader. Plain and simple. I just hate. I can't put it any other way. I can't put it any nicer or any gentler. It's not effective leadership. Building a culture of feedback is one of the most important things that you can do as a leader. You want to be able to have a culture of trust and honesty and integrity where you can have feedback coming to you as a leader from your people, and you can also be providing feedback to your people based on the expectations of their role. And maybe the expectations change over time. Then you have a conversation with that person about how those expectations are changing and what's new is being expected. Now, in an example where you might have someone who is used to perform in their role, and the role is growing and changing and expanding, and they are either not interested in growing and changing and expanding, or they're slow to learn the things that they need to, and you need someone to get into that role, that expanded role faster, that might be a case where you need to reassign them. Reassigning someone with the hopes that they'll quit is quiet quitting. It's dishonest. And you risk, one, that person, you're never going to not, they're never not going to find out. Well, I shouldn't say never. Most of the time, they will find out why they were reassigned. It's just going to get out. It's going to come through. And not only are you alienating and creating dissension with that one employee, so now you put them in another role, and now they're upset. Now they're potentially feeling dejected and not valued. And so that now they're going to really perform in the new role. How is that going to happen? The other thing that you're doing is you're risking alienating and losing talent anyway from the people that you want to keep. Because when other people on the team find out what you're doing, and if they find out that you haven't shared, you weren't honest, that you weren't in integrity, that you weren't giving honest and candid feedback, that you weren't giving people the opportunity to change and grow, and giving them the resources and the support they need, then chances are pretty good that those people are going to look for somewhere else where they can be more aligned and be in integrity with and in alignment with a leader who is in integrity, who is truthful, who is providing honest, candid feedback. So not only are you pushing someone out because you don't want to pay unemployment or you don't want to pay severance, you're now going to have to pay to replace more people. And you end up also potentially creating an environment of quiet quitting in the rest of the employees because they're upset and they're dissatisfied and they're going to disengage. So you're creating dissension and a lack of motivation and a lack of caring in the employee that you're moving. And then you're also creating all of that in the employees that you want to keep, that you want to grow and change and continue to develop. And so when you reassign people, like I said earlier, sometimes reassigning someone is the right thing to do. Only do it if you're having the conversations, giving the feedback, and making sure that that person knows and that they've been given the opportunity to expand and grow and change and live up to the expectations. One, they understand them. Two, them that they've been given feedback of whether they're meeting them or not, and that they've been given the chance to change. That has to be the starting point. If it does come down to the fact that they do need to be reassigned, then you need to explain to that person and to your team. Over communicate, be way more communicative, because people who don't have access to information, I used to say this all the time when I worked inside organizations, is that so many leaders don't want to say anything until they know everything. And people will always assume the worst. If you're not communicating to them, rumors will fly. So if you reassign someone without a communication plan to that person and to your team about why that person's being reassigned, then they're going to make rumors. They're going to make shit up. And it's probably going to be worse than the truth. So that's number one. And you want to make sure that the people who are being reassigned, that you're actually helping them understand what are their strengths. If you're keeping them, why are you keeping them? Now, if you're keeping them just hoping they quit, that's just flat out wrong. If you don't think that they have a place in your organization, then let them go. Help them find something that's going to fit their strengths. Help them find something that's going to help them really thrive. All you're doing, if you're doing quiet cutting and not communicating, is you're kicking a problem down the road. And this person is feeling lost and not understanding what's wrong, what's going on, what happened. So you want to give them the support they need to be successful. If you're reassigning them, give them the support in that role, in that new role, so that they can be successful. And when you communicate about what you're doing and why you're doing it, then they can make the choice to very clearly step up or learn and grow and change so that they can provide the most value to the organization if they want to stay. And maybe they realize in the process, sometimes in those situations, that employee might be like, oh gosh, thank God, I was miserable. I hated that job. And they were too afraid to say it. And that's a whole different situation. But if you don't want to keep people, if you don't believe they have a place in your organization, then terminate them. You are going to save more money in the long run. You're going to keep the employees that you want to keep. You let go of the people that you don't. Don't play games. Don't avoid unemployment and severance because you're afraid to be direct, because you're afraid to provide feedback. I have some workshops that I give on providing feedback. I coach leaders on providing feedback. I know others who provide courses on providing feedback. This is something that is a skill that every leader needs to master, is how to, one, provide affirming feedback, noticing people's strengths, noticing what they do well, noticing how they're a team player, noticing how they're trying and failing, and then providing constructive feedback of how they can improve and change as they go. Feedback is a critical aspect of leadership. Being open to receiving it and being skilled at providing it. Please, if you're in HR, if you are a leader, please do not take quiet cutting as a strategy to remove people out of positions and hope that they'll quit. I will talk to you next week. Have a great rest of your week. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me. I'd love to chat with you about how we can increase and improve the culture of feedback in your organization.